Welcome everyone to Credit Smash, the Cheesecake and Credit Seminar. First of all, I want to thank everyone for coming out and making sure that you all ate some great cheesecake and had some Moscato there. So please make sure before you leave, if you need to, take another slice if you like. I want to welcome you to our credit seminar. One of the most important things in today's society right now that has really been the detriment to our culture, quite frankly, is the lack of financial intelligence that we as a people, as a society, as a culture, as a community, we don't all have. We were having a great conversation earlier where just in conversation socially, we were talking about all the microcosm things that are affecting our society right now. When we talk about education, when we talk about family, we talk about the educational system. In fact, very sad about what has recently happened in Florida, Chicago, Arizona, all these different places where the moral fabric has really started to become unraveled in this country. But we're not going to talk about that today. We're going to really focus on credit, which is something that really isn't being taught in the school systems. I think we can all venture to say that had we known about credit, grades 1 through 12, you might be in a better place, quite frankly. And there are those out there that know about credit because their families have taught them, but then there's a lot of other families that didn't teach about that type of mentality. So what we're going to talk about here today is how to smash some of the stereotypical things that happen when it comes to credit. And let's get some education on exactly what credit is. So with no further ado, let's just jump right in. First of all, I want to ask, and I kind of, without giving all the way the secret there, but first of all, does anyone know what credit actually is?
It's an extension of what you don't have, apparently. That's kind of how they make it seem,
An extension. Yeah. An extension of what you don't have. Or, let me kind of paraphrase it a different way. It's more of the ability to make payments over time. That's credit. Because when someone is giving you something and in return you're making payments over time, they're giving you that leeway, that credit, basically. And that's basically what credit is. In this country here today, starting way back from the 1920s all up to the 40s and the 50s and leading all up to the 70s, credit wasn't that big of a deal back in those years. But it's become more prevalent as the Industrial Revolution kicked in, as the internet has kicked in today's society. From the 70s on, you virtually need credit for everything nowadays. And if you don't have it, then you're pretty much out of luck. I mean, gone are the days that you used to think, well, cash rules. We all know that song, Cash Rules Everything Around Me, back in the 90s. Well, that was a great song, but in reality, it doesn't rule everything. In today's society, you don't want to be using up all your cash. You want to have some leverage. And that's what we're going to talk about, how to get leverage. Now, one thing that you want to be aware of, there's a term called FICO score. Anyone know what a FICO score is?
I thought it was the average between all the TransUnion. It's pretty much what it is, right? The average of the TransUnion
close
scores.
They add the Equifax, they add all the credit scores, and they divide it by how much you make.
Close. Anybody else know what a FICO score is? No? Okay. A FICO score, in all actuality, is a mathematical algorithm. That's what a FICO score is. It's not an average of anything. It's a algorithm. It's a mathematical score which indicates what your paying ability is like. And these major companies, Equifax, TransUnion, Experian, are the people that report these scores. Now, a lot of folks out there are using Credit Karma. Credit Karma has a scoring algorithm, but it's not FICO. It's called TransGuard. And I would recommend that if you don't know the difference between the two, you want to get some education on the difference between the scoring modules. TransGuard uses a model that takes a trend of your credit over time. FICO is more of a snapshot of what has happened as of right now, today, right?
True.
Now, these mathematical scores are very important because in this country, if you don't know what your FICO score is, you're probably behind the 8 ball, right? A FICO score is attributed to a lot of different factors, and we're going to get into how does a FICO score become what it is. But these major bureaus, Equifax, TransUnion, Experian, are only 3. Well, in fact, there's 40 different scoring modules out there, 40 different companies that report scores. When you go to rent something from a rental agency, they don't even use FICO score. They don't even use these. They use another rental agency that scores your credit. When you go to buy a car, FICO has 8 different types of scoring models. Some of them they use for a car, which is a FICO 8. Some of them are used for credit cards, which is a FICO 2 and a FICO 4. All these different models, they're looking for different things when it comes to you and your payment history and what you're doing.
Attribute back to credit.
Exactly, right? Now, for those of you that are looking to purchase a house one day, you want to be concerned about your middle score. Now, a middle score is not an average of these scores. A middle score, when it comes to FICO, is actually, you take the highest score, you take the lowest score, whatever score is in the middle, this is your actual FICO score. So for instance, if you were going to go buy a house, you can actually buy a house with the lowest credit score, I believe is a 550, believe it or not, from FHA. Now, I would not recommend that because you're going to have to come up with a ton of a down payment, and the interest rate is not going to be very favorable. You want to get into the sixes, 620, 640, 680, 7s. That's where you want to be because you're going to get more favorable rates that way, right? So your mid score, this right here, is your mid FICO score. Everyone has one. Just like everyone has a social security number, a birth date, and all that good stuff, everyone has a FICO score. So there's multiple companies that you can go to get this FICO score. Credit Karma is not the place. All right? Credit Karma is used for educational purposes, free, and it's great, but ultimately, it's not going to really give you the score that you're really looking for. So let's talk about it. What makes up your FICO score? Well, there's 4 factors that ultimately make up a FICO score. First of all is your payment history. Now, payment history specifically relates to how you're paying your bills per month. Every 30 days, that scoring is taking track of how you're actually paying. That payment history, when you go past 30 days, now you're at 60, now you're at 90, now you're at 120 days. That history puts dings on your credit, right? You get into 60 days, 90 days, 120, then you're talking charge-off area, which we'll get into that later. But this payment history makes up 35% of your score. How you pay your bills every month makes up the majority of your score. The other thing is called utilization and the capacity of which you're using these cards. So let's say, for instance, D, if I was able to give you $1,000 on a credit card and you used up $1,000 per month, how much capacity of that card would you have used? 100%. 100%. Well, anytime you go over 30% on your card, your score drops every month. Then if you're late paying that card, you can see where the bulk of your score is going to be just on these 2 things alone. Literally, you should maintain 30% of your utilization on all of your credit. So if you have a $300 card, a $100 card, $1,000 card, $10,000 in credit. Anytime you're over 30%, that utilization is going to be a negative towards you. The next thing is the length of your credit. And what this simply means is how long have you been in the system? And being in the system of credit, if you're only there for 3 months or 6 months or 9 months or 1 year, that's a very short history. That short history is not going to give you much percentage here. Now, if you had credit, let's say you've been since 18 years of age, your mom or your dad put you on as an authorized user or something, and you actually had, now you're 30 years old, you would have had over 15 years, 20 years worth of good credit. That length of credit is very important because a lot of folks want to get to this 800 score, 850, right? Very difficult to do if you haven't been in the system very long. Facts, right? People think out there that you can get this enormous score, but if your credit, your average of your creditors are below a 2-year span or so to speak, you're going to be very slow building up your credit, right? Very important. We'll come back to that in a minute. The next thing that makes up your, or the factors that build up your score is new credit. So this applies to inquiries, right? Inquiries will knock off anywhere from 2 to 3 points off of your credit just for you giving your social to whomever, right? So you want to be careful. In a year's time, you should only have at minimum 2 to 3 inquiries per year. Anytime you have anything more than that, then you're looking at yourself, or creditors are looking at you as a risk, because you're applying for everywhere. And you may not be able to get the credit, but you keep on applying. Facts. When you go to an auto dealership and an auto dealership doesn't have a loan company there for you, guess what they're going to do? They're going to run your credit to 10 people, right? Because they're trying to find someone. Where every time they're doing that, they're hitting your credit, right? So you want to be careful of that. That's always good. If your credit was good, you can go to a credit union. You can get one lender to fund you the loan. Or if you have a loan in mind, you can go to that company and say, hey, I already got such and such finance company ready to go.
I have a question, and there's no such thing as a soft hit, right? Because when I went to the car dealership, that's what they told me. Oh, don't worry about it. It's just a soft hit. It's not gonna.
There is a such thing, but the car dealerships don't do that. All right? A soft inquiry versus a hard inquiry. Let me explain the two. A hard inquiry would be anybody that's pulling your credit without your well, let me try to say this a different way. Any person that pulls your credit and you didn't pull it, that means that's a hard inquiry, right? Car, credit card, go to apply for your rental agent, whatever. That's inquiry. That's a hard inquiry. A soft inquiry would be something like if you were going to apply for a job, right? Or if you pulled your own credit yourself, that would be considered a soft inquiry. Or if insurance companies pull soft inquiries when they're checking your credit. Utility companies may or may not do soft inquiries, you know? So that would be considered a soft inquiry. But anytime you're trying to get something, you're trying to acquire something, then that's going to be a hard inquiry. So that's the difference. So that loan company probably is lying to you. You pulled your credit, you're probably going to see them showing up as an inquiry, more than likely. Last thing, the types of credit. This is very important because a lot of folks seem to think that if you just have student loans, that you're building up credit. Or you think that if you have one credit card, you got credit. No, right? The mix of type of accounts that you actually have, FICO score wants to see that you have a mix of accounts. The mix of accounts that I'm referring to are installment loans, revolving loans. You know, the difference between the two, let me explain that. A revolving loan is any loan where your credit goes, the credit limit can go up and down, like a credit card. Credit card is considered revolving because it's always moving. An installment loan is a one set payment, and after you finish these payments, that's the end of it, right? So a car loan would be an installment loan. A student loan would be an installment loan.
Is a mortgage?
And a mortgage loan would be considered an installment loan. these types of loans, the installment loans are one type. Another type would be the revolving, like even a furniture account would be considered an installment loan. Unless, of course, they're granting you credit on a normal basis, right? So the mix of type of accounts that you have, that makes up 10%. You just can't have one of one thing. You gotta have a mix. That's how your score goes up. And that's how it fluctuates. So, any questions thus far? You see the percentages? You see what these all mean? Let's move to the next.